The federal government said the leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu, and his collaborators will face the full wrath of the law. The Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, says the government has uncovered a treasure trove of information on the leader of the proscribed IBOP and his collaborators on calls for fair hearing for Kanu. The minister claims that Kanu had a fair deal before he jumped bail in 2017. Lai Mohammed, like his justice counterpart, has unveiled Kanu's arrest and repatriation on Tuesday and declined to say how the IPOB leader was arrested and brought to Nigeria.
We can tell you that the forensic investigation carried out so far has revealed a treasure trove of information on the proscribed IPOB leader and his collaborators. While the investigation continues, we assure you that none of the collaborators, irrespective of their standing in society, will be spared. They will all face the full wrath of the law for their activities that challenge our nation's sovereignty and threatens its unity. No one, no matter how.
Meanwhile, IPOB leaders in custody, the residents of Yoruba rights activist Sunday Adeyemo, also known as Sunday Igboho, in the Sohoka area of Ibadan, Oyo State, was raided by Nigerian security forces. According to Igboho spokesman Olayomi Koiki, more than 100 men wearing Nigerian Army military camouflage invaded the residence early this morning in 7 Nigerian Army patrol vans and proceeded to destroy property, including parked vehicles. Some of the occupants of the house are reported to have been taken away by the invaders. Igboho's Ibadan residence was first reportedly attacked in January 2021 after he issued a 7-day ultimatum to herders in the Barakwa area of Oyo State. He accused the herders of being culpable of the killings and the kidnappings that happened in the town. However, the Department of State Security also gave an address on the raid at the Sunday Igboho's residence.
Once again, welcome to the national headquarters of the Department of State Services, Abuja here. Typical of you, we have always had you, and you have remained our great partners. This is a press briefing, like I said, holding at the Department of State Services, DSS Abuja, on a joint security operation carried out on the 1st of July at Ibadan, Oyo State. In the early hours, about 10:34 hours to be precise, today, 1st July 2021, a joint team of security operatives raided the residence of Sunday Adeyemo, also known as Sunday Igboho, at Shoka, Ibadan, Oyo State. This was based on intelligence in the place. On approach to the residence, the team came under heavy gun attack by 9 men suspected to be Igboho's guards. 6 of them were armed with AK-47 gun and 3 others with pump-action rifles. In the course of the exchange, 2 of Igboho's armed men were gunned down, while the rest were subdued and arrested. Only one operative, who was shot by the assailants on his right hand, sustained injury. He has, however, received medical attention and is very stable. Afterwards, the team procedurally searched the house of Igboho and subsequently recovered the following items amongst others: 7 AK-47 assault rifles, as you can see on display, 3 pump-action rifles, they are also there, 30 fully charged AK-47 magazines, 5,000 rounds of 7.62 mm ammunition, 5 cutlasses, 1 jackknife, 1 penknife, 2 pistol holsters, 1 binoculars, a wallet containing $5 US and $1 denomination, local and international driver's licenses in his name, ATM cards.
We'll go for a quick commercial break and we'll come back and talk some more about this. All right, welcome back to the morning show right in the Rise News channel. Dr. Bati, your views on this?
Well, 2 issues here. First, the briefing by the Minister of Information, and also the briefing by Dr. Peter Afunaya, the spokesperson of the Department of State Services, on 2 issues. One, the interception, the rearrest of Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the Indigenous Peoples of Biafra, IPOB, and second, the incident that occurred between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. at the residence in Soka village in Ibadan yesterday of Sunday Adeyemo, Chief Sunday Adeyemo, popularly known as Sunday Igboho, head of a group in the southwestern part of Nigeria, asking for not just self-determination, but separation from Nigeria. If you look at the statements given on both incidents by the Minister of Information and also by Dr. Afunaya speaking for the DSS, there are similarities, there are convergence points. And the main convergent point is about the state trying to protect its interests. The Minister of Information is saying that, look, nobody is above the law, and that anybody that tries to undermine the state or overwhelm the Nigerian state, that the government will not fold his arms. The government of Nigeria will go after such a person, and that nobody will be spared in that regard. That, in a sense, is a justification of the 2 major actions that we have seen taken by the Nigerian government, either by the DSS or Nigeria in collaboration with other international partners, as cited by the Minister of Information. Second, the Minister of Information, with regard to Nnamdi Kanu, made a point about fair trial for Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of IPOB. In that regard, he's trying to respond to concerns that have been expressed by everyone else, other stakeholders, that look, nothing must happen to Nnamdi Kanu, that due process must be followed, that the rule of law must be observed. And this, of course, is the standard procedure in legal proceedings. His next day in court will be July 26. It was arraigned on Tuesday, and the 11-count charges that were there before were reaffirmed, but we have been told that new charges will be preferred. Giving him a fair trial will mean that, all the rules under Section 36 of the Constitution and other rules of criminal prosecution or justice administration under the ACJA will all be observed. 3, the Minister of Information, just like the Attorney General of the Federation before him, refused to disclose the identity of the international collaborators that led to the arrest or the rearrest, or the interception, as they insist, of Nnamdi Kanu. But what the Nigerian government must know is that this has already generated substantial interest in Kenya, which is one of the countries that people are pointed to. In fact, one particular media house in Kenya, Punchline Africa TV, led by one, I think it's Dr. Mwanga and Sanga, he was on air to say that, look, nobody should drag his own TV station, where Nnamdi Kanu had an interview on May 21, 2021. So there is already an international dimension to this. The British authorities, particularly the High Commission in Nigeria, they said, well, they are ready to assist Nigeria with consular consultation with regard to the fact that questions have been raised about whatever role may have been played by that British High Commission. So I think that the statement by the Minister of Information is to a large extent supportive of the position of the Minister of the Attorney General of the Federation, and also trying to reassure everyone that there will be fair trial. Where that part about how Nnamdi Kanu has been living large, how he's been riding private jets, flying about in private jets and wearing Fendi and all of that, I don't know how that particular piece of information is important. But whatever relevant evidence is useful will be provided before the court. Now, as for the incident in Ibadan with regard to Sunday Igboho, well, the big issue here, certain questions should be raised. Was Igboho invited by the DSS? Was there a search warrant? What happened in Igboho's house? Will it be right to describe it as a Gestapo-style operation by the Department of State Services? Because if the state, hiding under the fact that under Section 14 of the Constitution, part of its responsibility is to ensure security, can the state be allowed to adopt Gestapo-style to just invade people's houses? Now, the point that has been made is that there was a confrontation. Dr. Afunaya said 9 gunmen carrying automatic weapons and AK-47 confronted them as the DSS team approached the house. Now, so if that is the case, was it a case of a shootout resulting in the death of persons and the apprehension of others? The main import of Dr. Afunaya's statement on behalf of the DSS was just to provide background information. He was accused, Igboho was accused of stockpiling arms. And they've given us a demonstration of some of the arms and ammunition that they found there. So, there are a lot of questions to be raised. Now, what the DSS has done in addition is to ask that Sunday Igboho should present himself, should report to the nearest Department of State Services station. Well, I think Sunday Igboho, who is on record as having refused invitation from state authorities in the past, should not constitute himself into an outlaw. He should present himself accordingly, and just as we have been promised by the Minister of Information that in the Kanu case, that fair trial will be observed, due process will be followed. We also expect that due process will be followed. And we hope that there's no politics involved in all of this, because there have been, insinuations that, and there was an article making the rounds yesterday that this is a balancing act. However, that balancing act has not yet gone to the north. Some people are saying that there is a particular person, one Dogo Gide, in the north. When is the state going to go after that person? If indeed the state is saying certain non-state actors are seeking to overwhelm the Nigerian state. Now, the state has a responsibility to protect itself. I repeat that point, as somebody who has once worked for the state. But the state also, in doing so, must be seen to be protecting itself in line with basic rules and procedures that do not violate the rule of law or fundamental human rights.
Right. Thank you for this point made, Dr. Abati. We'll quickly move to our dependable Rots Sodiri. Rots, good morning. Let's talk about business. What's happening?
Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning to all our viewers. What is happening? It's the petroleum industry bill. It's been passed. It's been passed. The legislature passed it yesterday. Look, can we give credits to Minister of State Timi Presilva for just 1 second? The marginal bid rounds, how long did that take before that happened? 13, 15 years? Now he's got the PIB passed after about 14 or so years. There's still some issues that need to be worked out, some harmonization that needs to happen, because the thorny issue of allocation to host communities ended up being 3%. What was in the bill, proposed in the bill, was 5%. There was a closed-door session between Minister Timi Presilva, the Senate President Ahmad Lawan, and Mele Kyari, GMD of the NNPC. Closed-door session, they came out, said it was down to 3%. The chair of the ad hoc committee on petroleum, upstream midstream and gas, Mr. Senator Nakudu, explained that, look, House of Reps passed 2.5%, we've got it up to 3%. There needs to be some harmonization that has to happen there. So essentially now, and also this is another bigger question, what happens to the NDDC, which is the Niger Delta Development Commission, which was as far as its funding is concerned, was focused on host communities, because now there's a host community development fund from which this, well, if it's 3%, if it ends up being 3% or goes back to 5%, I think it's going to end up being 3%. 3% of previous year's profits from oil and gas companies will go directly into that host development fund pot. So what happens to the NNDC going forward? Does that mean it's going to be scrapped? So that's something that that has to be addressed. Also, there's now regulatory commissions for upstream, midstream, and downstream operations in the oil and gas sector. That now means that the NNPC is no longer a regulatory body. It's now going to be a commercial entity competing like any other oil and gas company, and it has to be commercially viable. So what does that now mean? That now means no more subsidies, theoretically, according to the bill, because now a commercially viable company cannot be chesting the costs of subsidies between the 162 naira and if I'll get to Zainab Ahmed in a minute, because she said it was about 500 naira in other countries. So the NNPC now has to be commercially viable, going to be listed on the exchanges here on the NGX. Shares, will be issued and so on and so forth. So, this is good, but there's still, the gas portion of the petroleum industry bill. Our head of our political correspondent, senior political correspondent, in Abuja, asked the Senate yesterday, Sambo, what is wrong with me? There's too much information going on in my head. Sambo asked, because I even spoke to Sambo yesterday, he asked the Senate, because he was there when it was being passed, he was like, what about the gas portions of the petroleum industry bill, which Shell had complained about with respect to not being fiscally viable and for the oil and gas entities? And the answer, he said, when I spoke to him, he said the answer, and I think he has a special package on that, which we'll probably have already played or we'll play later for our viewers. But the answer wasn't satisfactory. What he was told by the lawmakers was that we will address that. Now, it's a 500-page document. I'm at page like 88. So I haven't gone through. I know the gas portion is in there, but remember what Shell said. Shell said that the fiscal portions of the fiscal procedures or fiscal framework for gas, which is now being treated as a hydrocarbon in the petroleum industry bill, so appropriate taxes and so on are going to be applied. Disincentivized investments from oil and gas companies, and also the fact that the PIB calls for the oil and gas companies to address domestic production, domestic demand for gas first before being able to export what's left overseas. They didn't like that at all. So we have to see whether that has been addressed. But again, Sambo's question was not directly answered. So, but still, by and large, we now wait for the harmonization to come through. That's going to take a little bit of time before it goes to the president. Hopefully the president signs this. But there's massive ramifications. And again, Timmy Presilva, marginal build rounds, PIB, he's done some work there. We move to Zainab Ahmed. I mentioned Zainab Ahmed. And the reason why I mentioned her was because she had a presentation on the medium-term expenditure framework for the 2022 through 2024 fiscal structure for the country, the budget. 2022's budget is about 11.9 trillion naira. That's what's proposed. But the subsidy, there's an allocation for 900 billion naira subsidy, fuel subsidies in 2022. And Zainab Ahmed just went off in that presentation, said Nigeria is being penny-wise, pound-foolish, that Nigerians with 3, 4, 5 cars are the ones that are being subsidized for fuel, that you could put this 900 billion towards education and other entities. Why are we're subsidizing consumption, essentially? I mean, she spoke her mind about the subsidy. The metrics, we've talked about this before. I think we talked about this when the 2021 budget was being put forward. The metrics in the 2022 budget, 13.5% inflation. Inflation is at 17.93. Can we get down to 13 by next year when this budget is passed? $57 per barrel benchmark. That's conservative. 2.3 or 2.5% GDP growth for 2022. Can we get there by that time? So I've always had a few issues with the metrics that we use. And then 410 naira per dollar exchange rates for the 2022 budget. So that's what we have. But the takeaway from that is what she was really just railing against the subsidy. I mean, at this point, with the PIB now being passed, we have to see whether, again, actions speak louder than words, and we see that being eliminated again with the NNPC becoming having to become a commercially viable company. Finally, Vice President OSINBAJO was talking about mines and steel. He says he wants to see better management of the mining and mining sector because of what's minerals mean to us potentially. Even on the Global Business Report with HRISE business analyst Chika Mbonu, we talked about Minister Adegbite of Mines and Steel. He was saying that the ministries, departments and agencies have to synchronize and come together in order to get better management for mining. And now Vice President OSINBAJO is adding his thoughts to that. The mining sector contributes less than 1% to GDP. Now, look at South Africa. South Africa, I said yesterday, or was it the day before, that they're projected to have another budget trade surplus in South Africa based on, we did talk about this yesterday. We talked about Rio Tinto and the force majeure. Rufai, I remember your comments on that. You can see what mining means to a nation like South Africa. So Nigeria is just sitting on so much potential. I mean, we just have to get the regulation going, stop smuggling, and, get that sorted out. That's our African business update.
Has always been corruption. Look at mining. Mining is so rich, so rich. I mean, we all forget that in South Africa, for instance, the fact that South Africa is still making money from mining is shocking. In the sense that when you check historically, it was the same mining that Cecil Rhodes and Benny Betano made a lot of money from in South Africa and Botswana and in Nyasaland and areas like that. And at a point, Cecil Rhodes was the richest man in the world, all from the resource and the mining of South Africa. And when you check it, this was close to 50, 70, 80 years ago, close to 100 years ago. And when you still check it, that mining is still a very formidable part of South African economy. That's to show you there's a lot of money. But the question is, how can we ensure that we make money from it? The incursions we made into gold mining in this country, what has resulted from it? We've talked about artisanal mining. How have we pushed that forward? How have we looked for those minerals? But apart from mining, we should start looking at forms of making money other than mining. Because you see, all these minerals under the ground is not the way of the new world. The way of the new world is data, big tech, and science. So even if we get money from mining and petroleum and some other things, we should invest it in the way of the new world, the technologies of the new world. And what is instructive for us we should do, we should try as much as possible to drive in investment that will create the technology of the new world. Yesterday, something happened in Sunderland. Nissan used to have a car factory in Sunderland that they built in 1986. They shut the car factory a couple of years ago. Now they've restarted another factory to do what, Rotus?
Batteries.
To provide batteries to power electric cars.
Right.
They are investing £1 billion sterling. They are creating 6,000 jobs over the next couple of years in Sunderland. That's the way of the new world. We should start hearing about factories that can provide batteries for electric powered cars in this country that can create employment, because the way of the world is changing. So when we look at mining and some other natural resource, we should know it's not going to last forever. And that's why when you even ask me my views about PIB, I look and laugh. And I ask a question. Did the ice age end because the world ran out of ice? No. So the question is, are we still even going to get that mammoth investment in oil and gas after passing the PIB? Where are a lot of people investing money in these days? They are investing money in new sciences. Rotus, you yourself, you talked yesterday that Total has become Total Energy. Everybody's investing in renewable. They said we've lost 200 billion by not passing this. Is oil still fanciful? Because we forget, we might pass PIB from today till tomorrow. But the question we should ask ourselves, if you don't get investment to drive the oil sector, then it doesn't move. Are we going to get that investment? Time will tell. But congratulations anyway.
Well, before we say congratulations, is it true that the jinx has been broken? What is the guarantee that this time around, particularly on the sensitive issue of the trust fund for the host communities with regard to the petroleum industry bill, that when it goes to this third reading, this harmonization that you talked about, that there will be a consensus as regards the 3% and the 5% and the 10% that the host communities are asking for. I know many people, will be pleased with the fact.
Forget that 10%. Sorry to interrupt. That 10% is not happening.
I know, but I mean,
10% is not happening. Yeah,
but the host communities brought it forward because they wanted it to be negotiated. And the main outcome from the discussion about, that share of profit by the host communities is that, look, even 5% will be too much money. Right? One of the debaters brought up that argument. But in the House of Reps, you could see that there was division. there was an attempt to hush up some contributors major stakeholders, even in the Senate, who wanted a different kind of percentage. So this may be the devil in the room that we may still have to deal with. As for solid minerals, yes, it is right for the Vice President to make the right kind of noise, what we can do with regard to solid minerals. But you will recall that at least 2 ministers in recent times, first I think it was Obi Ezekwesili. She was a Minister of Solid Minerals at the time. And then after that, the current governor of Ekiti State, Minister Kayode Fayemi, who provided a very robust framework for managing the solid mineral sector in Nigeria. But at the end of the day, because of the kind of politics that we play, many of those recommendations that came up under those 2 ministers, we've not been able to translate them into concrete action. It is not true that, mining will just disappear. It will take quite some time before we make that transition from fossil fuel, from mining to renewable energy. And this was the point that Timi Presiva was making the other day when he said Nigeria had discovered about 206 trillion cubic feet of gas. And he made the point that, look, that transition that the entire world is talking about has to be gradual. But the main challenge is, what are we doing in terms of how we manage resources, how we move from an obsession with oil to other resources that are available within the country, and to ensure that value, relevant value, necessary value is added. But, it's a useful debate. Later today, we'll be talking more in greater detail about the PIV with a man who knows it all and who has been part of that industry for almost 50 years. So we'll bring up some of those issues that we have raised. Thank you, Rotus.
All right, really appreciate you, Rotus. We'll quickly move over to Michael now. Michael Wilson, just from London. Michael, good morning, Michael.
Lunchtime today, no doubt, Rotus.
Okay, Michael is there. Good. Voila. Michael, go straight ahead. Go ahead. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, so for the US jobs figures, Rotus will be covering all that report later on, no doubt. Mainland, for what it's worth, Asia markets down slightly. Chinese stocks biggest losers, Hong Kong down about 1%, not hugely basically. So closely watched jobs report. And of course, the US is therefore, after that, be going on its Independence Day holiday, so they'll be pretty happy. I hope they get some nice figures for that. China, President Xi Jinping is looking ahead to the next 100 years of China's Communist Party. He was talking about the unfulfilled dream of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. This is the 100-year celebration of the Chinese Communist Party. It needs to get through the looming challenges at the moment, the middle income trap, and of course the demographics as well, more old people. And it will hold its 20th Party Congress next year, and there may be more about where China is going then, but it's a long time to wait before then. China's tech crackdown, apparently, according to some observers, is more a new way. They allow... We're trying to crimp the power of tech companies. Not so, according to some observers. What they're actually doing is letting these companies establish themselves and then see where they're going and then see how they're going to regulate them, which seems a sensible way of putting policy. But that apparently, according to some observers, is what they're trying to do. Taiwan, though, by contrast, has lashed out at China's reunification pledge. In that same speech from the president, he was talking about a complete reunification of Taiwan. The Taiwan Mainland Affairs Council acknowledged that the Chinese Communist Party had achieved economic development, but added that it clamped down on democracy and violated human rights and grown more dictatorial. So into space then, and Richard Branson wants to beat Jeff Bezos into space. Virgin Atlantic announced yesterday that the space tourism company, there'll be a space flight with Branson on it on July the 11th. Billionaire Jeff Bezos is going with Blue Origin on July the 20th. This will be Virgin Galactic's 4th test space flight since May the 22nd. Adds more principles as Jeff Bezos, talking about him, steps down. What they're saying is they've got this kind of rule book in the company, which has got lots of pointers towards corporate excellence and so on. And they're talking about... They have talked about customer obsession and all that kind of stuff, which made them good. The first one is the new one is strive to be the Earth's best employer. This comes obviously after criticism of working for Amazon in one of its warehouses is not a lot of fun, apparently. And success and scale bring broad responsibility. Again, appealing, they hope, to the sort of stakeholder mentality of their shareholders. So then, US, it's a global pause basically before the US numbers. Dow Jones and all the futures contracts relatively flat. We expect a figure of about 706,000, not that million that was quoted before. So it's actually catching up, but not that quick. Importantly, analysts will be looking at the average hourly price increase in wages. Wage inflation is the most important thing for checking how much inflation is going to spike up later in the year. If, according to the Fed, they see through it, or they don't. Maybe they won't. US global minimum tax agreement spans 130 nations. That's according to Ms. Janet Yellen. This is out from the OECD meeting in Paris yesterday. They haven't actually said what that global minimum tax rate is going to be. We think it's probably going to be about 15%, but it's reported that some of the largest companies in the world could be paying an extra $100 billion in tax. However, 9 of the 139 countries at this meeting refused to sign up, including Estonia, Hungary, and, yes, you guessed it, Ireland. The GMT would apparently according to some, it would apparently end the practice of global corporations, highlighting and going to different low tax headquarters. It'll have to be approved by the G20 later this month. It'll be high on the agenda then. Here's something from the new OECD Secretary General. Decode this. He says, this package does not eliminate tax competition, but it does set multilaterally agreed limitations on it. What does that mean? I have no idea, but anyway, that's what he said. Here in the UK, Bank of England Governor Mr. Bailey Andrew Bailey has poured calm over those rather troubled waters about inflation that were raised by the outgoing chief economist Andy Haldane that we were talking about yesterday. He's saying up to 4% inflation in the UK by the end of the year. Bank of England is saying maybe 3%, but he's not that worried about it. And meanwhile, the Chancellor talking to the bank, talking to the city from the Mansion House speech just across from the Bank of England last night, urged the financial industry to foster closer ties with China. That's clearly signals that equivalence discussions with the EU have actually been abandoned. So then, all important for those oil revenue dependent companies, delayed the decision yesterday on as price. Going to be talking again this afternoon. Got to $76 a barrel, then easing to 75 yesterday afternoon. WTI closing at 75. So no conclusions yet, but no doubt Rotus will be talking about this later in the day as the discussions go into this afternoon. That's the global view.
All right, Michael, great. I want to just jump on it. Inflation. Yesterday, you know him, Mohammed Elian, formerly of Pimlico, came out with an op-ed in Financial Times saying, yes, he understands the likes of Andrew Bailey saying, oh, it's transitory inflation. But the truth is, aggregate demand will definitely increase. And that's the strong argument for inflation. And that's the argument, too, the chief economist that left the Bank of England is making, too. And that's also the argument a lot of people, over 50 economists over Europe and America that came together to say that this will go up. And that has started to affect gold prices. After that report, gold prices plummeted because a lot of people are looking, okay, we can't hold on to gold any longer since the Bank of, the Fed in America will probably increase interest rates sometime around 2022, 2023. So those are the arguments on ground. I mean, what's your take on all of these big arguments? 3 arguments now on the table for you, Michael.
I agree with all those separate elements. They could be true, they might be true, they might not be true. Certainly people got out of gold because interest rates would be going up. But, you know, I mean, I think it's still far too early to make big calls like that. 50 economists, who cares about 50 economists? I mean, they may be right, they may be wrong. We've had 150 economists complaining about monetary policy in this country probably 40 years ago, and they were completely wrong. And yet they all, was 100, was it? They all wrote to the Times and said, this is completely wrong. It wasn't. It was exactly the right thing to do. So economists always, you know, on the one hand, on the other hand, and all that. I'm just an observer. I see what goes on. I take on board all these arguments. I'm not an economist myself. I look at the arguments and I say, well, it is possible. So you've got 2 points of view. There are always 2 points of view about things. What the Bank of England governor is saying is, look, these are our forecasts. Andy Haldane was always on the outside of what the rest of the committee thought. I would only he's always been an outlier as far as inflation and interest rates are concerned. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying that the other members of that committee, and again, I think that they ought to be small businessmen. That's what I would do. But I mean, who am I to say these kind of things? But they are actually looking at evidence which is gathered by the Bank of England around various regions of the country in the same way that the Fed does. Now, they may be wrong. They may be getting this wrong. I would say two things. I don't necessarily think that demand's going to be that high. I think there'll be a spike and then it will fall away as people actually look to their savings, look to the difficulties coming ahead. I think labour markets are going to struggle, so although we'll be looking at average earnings, quite specifically in the jobs figures out this morning from the United States, I don't see those necessarily as a pressure right now. They might be. But thirdly, the big one is the kink in supply chain is going to be worked out because more and more countries are thinking of inboarding what they actually do. You'll see that change a lot, I think, over the third and fourth quarter of the year. I know we have this debate most weeks. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just putting the other point of view to say that there is a lot of evidence around which is conflicting at the moment. It's very, very difficult to see the true landscape, as it usually is.
Well, quickly, Michael, the global tax overhaul. 139 countries were involved in that conversation. 130 agreed on that, minimum of 15%. Janet Yellen, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, says this is a triumph for economic diplomacy. How much of a triumph is it? And how about the interests of those 9 countries that refuse to accede to the agreement, particularly Ireland, which says, look, we're not willing to join this agreement. And as for OPEC Plus, with the, let's say, the veto, more or less, by the United Arab Emirates yesterday, the talks continue today. Yes, Brent crude and WTI, they've gone up to over $75. Do you think they'll be able to reach a consensus today? Because the meetings have been postponed to today.
I think I get where the UAE, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. I do beg your pardon. There's a bit of hay fever around at the moment in this country. Excuse me, wait 1 second. Sorry. That's better. Okay, right. OPEC, yeah, there will be some sort of it'll be cobbled together agreement. It always is. What the UAE is actually saying, I'm quite surprised, is actually what they've done is they've geared up their industry for more production. So they're saying, all right, we're all geared up, so why can't we agree on this? I think that some kind of accommodation will probably be reached. But I think the most important thing that we're going to get out of this is how long the agreement that is reached this afternoon will actually continue for. Some people are saying, well, into 2022. Now, that would say a whole lot about the oil markets right now. I read you again about the OECD and Janet Yellen. This is what the new OECD Secretary General actually said. This package does not eliminate tax competition, but it does set multilaterally agreed limitations on it. Now, I have no idea what that means. What I think it might be getting to is that even though, and there was no figure quoted, remember, Janet Yellen did not quote the 15%. This is only what people are surmising right now. It may well be that there's a latitude, there's what we would term wriggle room for various countries to actually say, well, that's the minimum rate of tax, but there are different ways of attracting business. I fully consider, I said this at the time, that Ireland and the rest and a few others would say, no, we're not going to sign up to this because it affects our competitiveness. Fully understandable.
Sure. All right. Thank you so much, Michael, as always, and have a great weekend. And this one over to you. Good morning. How's it going?
Good morning. Very well. Thank you, Rufai. Good morning, Dr. Abati. Over 182.5 million cases of coronavirus cases have now been recorded globally, with at least 3.9 million deaths. Meanwhile, over 3 billion doses of the coronavirus vaccines have been administered globally. China alone has done about half of the global doses. Here in Nigeria, 74 new cases and 1 death were reported in the last 24 hours in Nigeria. Lagos posted 49 of the new infections, followed by Ondo State in the southwest with 12 cases. Let's look at the vaccination so far here in Nigeria against COVID-19. So here we have the figures for the first dose on your right, and the second dose on your left. A reminder that the authorities have just told us that a total of 4,024,000 doses through the COVAX scheme and other donations of the AstraZeneca vaccines were received in the country in March. If you do the maths of these two figures on your screen, the country is fast running out of the jab. Hopefully they come in as quickly as we can get them. And that brings me to this story that has been grabbing the headlines across the globe. A blistering attack, a blistering criticism. The man in charge of securing vaccines for Africa has blasted Europe for failing to deliver a single promised vaccine dose. Strive Masiyiwa says Africa has the money to buy the vaccines, but the manufacturers based in Europe are refusing to open up. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Not a single dose, not one vial, has left a European factory for Africa. Okay? When we've gone to talk to their manufacturers, they tell us that they are completely maxed out, meeting the needs of Europe. We are referred to India, okay, where a number of manufacturers exist that are manufacturing vaccines like the AstraZeneca vaccine under license. Okay, so Europe has to decide. You can't say you support us. They have vaccinated so many of their own people that they can now watch football without masks.
Very quickly elsewhere, let's touch on Bangladesh, where the country is now facing an upsurge in cases and has had to bring out the military to enforce the lockdown in Bangladesh. The third wave is driven by highly transmissible Delta variant. Public transport has closed and only essential services and factories are operating. In Israel, the world leader in coronavirus vaccination has reported its highest daily infection rate in 3 months as it scrambles to contain the spread of the new Delta variant. The Delta variant is causing a lot of havoc across the globe. Though there has been no increase in deaths in Israel, another pointer that the vaccines are breaking the link between infections and deaths. The health ministry reported 307 new cases and is expecting that these numbers will jump in the coming days. Finally, crowds gathering for the Euro 2020 soccer tournament are driving the current rise of the virus infections in Europe, and that's according to the World Health Organization. Now, the number of new cases rose by 10% last week alone. The WHO says this is driven by mixing of crowds in host cities, travel, and easing of restriction. The WHO is sounding the alarm that a third wave of infections is now inevitable unless citizens and legislatures across the continent are disciplined.
All right, great insight on this one. And it just shows all of us that coronavirus has not gone yet. We still need to take all those precautions. But I think in this fight against the Delta variant and other variants that will come out, because this virus will keep mutating, God knows how, where, until it mutates to a point where it can't mutate again. I think the formative word in all of this fight will be epitopes. What are epitopes? They're just antigen determinants. So once they can crack this antigen determinants, they'll be able to provide polyvariant vaccines that even if anything crops up, then it's going to nip it in the bud. And that's where scientists are looking at critically now in this new fight, because we cannot totally discount the fact that after this Delta variant, we will not still have other variants. Because as long as people move around and they interact and the virus jumps from one person to another person and the virus makes new iterations, then definitely we'll have new variants. But polyvariant vaccination, vaccines that can go polyvariant, that can take on the antigen determinants, with the strains, that will be the silver bullet for all of this. And as scientists continue to work, We just wish them the best in cracking all of this. But most importantly, what we can do in all of this fight is to stay safe. You know, bring back the mask mandate as in Lagos and other parts of the country. And this is why it's sad. Now you can walk into a restaurant without wearing a face mask. In fact, some restaurants don't even have hand sanitizers any longer. We've moved on from all of these things, and we should be careful. We should be careful.
Well, very quickly, let me start with Israel. Israel is one of the most successful countries in the world in terms of the immunization process. But we've seen some of those countries that did well with immunization now having problems. Countries like Vietnam, like Taiwan, and also now Israel, that recorded yesterday 307 cases of infection, the highest rate in 3 months. But even in spite of that, you know, the scientists in Israel are panicking because they're saying, how did this happen? And they are trying to look at what they can do to stem it. One of the measures they've introduced is to say indoors, now you have to wear masks. Secondly, they're saying maybe there's an issue at the airport, border controls, the Ben Gurion airport, that maybe not, you know, there's too much looseness in terms of how people come in and go out. Third, they're saying that perhaps they need to look at the population, 12 years and above, up to 18, who have not yet been vaccinated. But on the record, Israel has been able to report about 85% vaccination of its adult population. And yet you see some kind of panic. Why? As a result of the Indian variant, which, you know, is replicating itself at a very fast rate. So what are the lessons here? The lesson here is that, look, yes, there is high vaccine uptake in Israel, but high vaccine uptake is not a bulwark against the infection. In other words, it's not bulletproof effective. And I think that that's a lesson that other parts of the world should pay attention to. Now, as for Euro 2020, yes, I mean, if you look at the stadium in Budapest, about 60,000 persons, you know, at every match. In Wembley, when England met Scotland and England, played against Germany, there were about 40,000 people in the stadium. And other countries are expressing concerns. Scotland, Finland, they've been able to establish a connection between the crowd sizes in the stadiums and the rate of infection in their country. So much that Italy is now saying that the match tomorrow in Rome between England and Ukraine, that persons coming from England should just stay away. And if they should come in, anybody coming from England who has been in England in the last 2 weeks, you know, will have to be quarantined for 5 days. That's how serious it is. So, but many of these municipal authorities in Europe, in the face of Euro 2020, they've more or less relaxed. Look at the match between England and Germany. All the pubs were filled up, and nobody was observing any COVID restriction. As for Africa and the point by Strive Masiyiwa, well, this is the dilemma we face as an aid-dependent, charity-seeking continent. But it looks like there's an improvement with some of our countries trying to create their own manufacturing hubs with regard to COVID-19.